Greetings, friends, and welcome back to the Musings from the Mount podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Carenza. Through many of our recent episodes, we've been exploring various topics from the ponder on this book, things like black magic or love. But today, we thought we'd tackle something nice and easy, the subject of God. We'll examine this concept through the lens of the Alice Bailey Trans-Himalayan Agni Yoga tradition, exploring questions like, who or what are we talking about when we speak of God? Is it the encompassing of everything? And how might Eastern and Western perspectives complement rather than contradict each other? And perhaps, most importantly, how might this understanding change how we live our everyday lives? We hope you enjoy the episode. And if you do enjoy this podcast, please consider going to meditationmount.org and donating. Your donation helps us to bring you this podcast, as well as all the other programs the Mount produces, both today and in the future. We're incredibly grateful and honored by your support. Now back to the podcast and God. Through many of the last and most recent episodes, we've been returning to the ponder on this book, and we've done a wide range of topics, including black and white magic, love. So, we thought we'd go with something nice and easy and tackle the subject of God through the lens of the Alice Bailey Trans-Himalayan Agni Yoga tradition. So we'll just, start nice and easy. But
Exactly. If everything begins and ends with God, we might as well have our part.
Yeah, we thought we should cover it. So,
yeah.
But on a more serious note, like through this tradition, when we talk about God, who are we talking about? I mean, I think it's, every tradition has their own perspective on what God is, who God is. Even if it's a who, and so it's from my understanding, it's not the demiurge idea that there's like a kind of a flawed creator of this world. It's the encompassing of everything,
right?
So maybe we can tackle first, just like who are we talking about?
I think the first thing to realize that our current configuration of our mind is not the instrument to fully grasp what it is. Mm-hmm. The heart has a better chance of sensing into this deep mystery. So before we dive into the Alice Bailey quotes, why don't you and I look at what are some of the names that we know of that have been ascribed to this thing called God? Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of, in Buddhist terms, sometimes I've heard the phrase, the causeless cause. Mm-hmm. And then in the Alice Bailey tradition, it's the one in whom we live and move and have our being. And I'm thinking back, when I went to school, I went to a boys' school in England, and of course, we had uniforms, and on the uniform was a badge, school badge, and on the school badge was a Latin phrase. You always have to have a Latin motto. Mm-hmm. And the Latin motto for our school was Nisi Spiritus Dei Nihil. Without God, there is nothing. Mm-hmm. And I thought, that's a really powerful statement. Without God, nothing is.
Yeah.
And it didn't explain anything. It just was a bold statement. So I was faced with this question early on in my life, every time I put on my school blazer. And then I remember always, I don't know, my mother had to be the recipient of all my questions growing up. I think I was about 8 or 9. I remember asking her once, if the universe didn't exist, if God didn't exist, would there be anything else here in its place? And would there even be a here in which something else could exist? And my poor mother said, oh, don't ask me questions like that. It makes my head go funny. It's like, but this, I think, I'm just using that as an example. We have so many questions and we want the answer. The answer is not a thing. For me, the answer is a revelation of a truth that happens through a process that we instigate, that we're part of. And I guess that's what this whole episode is about. How do we access and participate in the process where we can be part of the revelation of what God is, as well as just an understanding of what this word means.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's a word that evokes almost instant reaction in most people, either positive or negative.
Right.
And it usually has more to do with their baggage from their formative years than anything else.
Well, yeah, and a lot of the statements are true. Like,
Yeah.
more crimes are being committed in the name of God than any. And
Yeah.
this is true because we use God to justify our own actions.
Mm-hmm.
In God's name, with God on our side, onward Christian soldiers,
Yeah.
whatever it is, it's the Crusades. We have co-opted God as part
Mm-hmm.
of religious warfare.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not today talking about religion. We're talking about how do we comprehend at the deepest level this great mystery of which we're a part. You and
Mm-hmm.
I are sitting here in a recording studio. Where did that come from?
Yeah.
We're sitting on this planet, Earth. Where did this come from? It's part of this galaxy. Where did this come from? So where did it come from? And I'm thinking in the beginning there was nothing or no thing.
Mm.
But the no thing itself was a thing, or a thingless thing. And out of nothing comes something or something. So this is where you can chase your tail.
Mm-hmm.
When the mind gets engaged, you go round and round in circles, and it's like, there must be another way of approaching this, Joey. And I believe you and I have named that it's through the portal of the heart, where we have a lived experience. So if you like, God is a mystery that has to be lived and experienced. And through that, a revelation takes place.
Mm. Yeah. That's an excellent way to approach this, because it does bring up a lot for everyone, and you can't help but ask questions.
Well,
Yeah.
and then we could easily say there's nothing that we can say about God,
Mm-hmm.
because there is a phrase in the ageless wisdom tradition that says, "The one about whom naught can be said."
Mm-hmm.
So what can you say about the one about whom naught can be said?
Well,
End the
apparently a
podcast. End the
lot.
podcast.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, apparently, because there's quite a few books written about this. So, yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do you want to kick this off, Joey? What door do we
Um,
open?
Well, I mean, maybe we should start with it. I think the top level concept is just God as the one life. The sum total of all lives. That's the whole quote is God is the sum total of all lives, the one life which integrates all lesser lives. And I think that's something we can kind of imagine. Yeah.
We can imagine something encompassing everything,
Mm-hmm.
but where did that something come from out of the no thing? And
Right.
that's where the mind goes nuts.
Yeah.
And we have to sort of
Yeah.
quiet it down and say, look,
Sure.
there's another way of getting to this. So
Yeah.
we're going to be reading from, this is section 62 in the Ponder on This Book, which is a compilation of the Alice Bailey writings, because it's part of the lineage of Meditation Mount. We're part of the Trans-Himalayan mystery tradition or wisdom tradition. And how we normally do it, Joey and I, we go through the text and then we say, what does this mean to us? Are there any anecdotes or any images or anything that it evokes? And then we invite you, the listener, to do the same. What does it call forth in you rather than do you believe in what we're saying?
Mm.
This is not offering you something to believe in. This is an inquiry. Our favorite phrase here at Meditation Mount is that we're here to inquire the way together.
Mm.
And that's what we're doing. So let's begin. This is the section on God. God, the universal mind, energy, force, the absolute, the unknown, these terms and many others are forced from the lips of those who, by means of the form side, seek the dweller within the form and cannot find him as yet. This failure to find him is due to the limitations of the physical brain and to the lack of development in the mechanism whereby the spiritual may be known and whereby he may and eventually will be contacted. I mean, we're talking about God as he here, but it could be any pronoun or no pronoun at all. So it's basically saying at the moment, the mind's not equipped to get the answers, but there is a way of embarking on this journey of discovery.
Mm.
And this was taken from a treatise on cosmic fire. And now we're going to move into a couple of quotes from a treatise on white magic by Alice Bailey. What the scientist calls energy, the religious man calls God. And yet the two are one, being but the manifested purpose in physical matter of a great extra-systemic identity. Nature is the appearance of the physical body of the Logos, and the laws of nature are the laws governing the natural processes of that body. The life of God, his energy and vitality, are found in every manifested atom. His essence indwells all forms. This we call spirit, yet he himself is other than those forms, just as man knows himself to be other than his bodies. He knows himself to be a will and a purpose. And as he progresses in evolution, that purpose and will become to him ever more consciously defined. So with the planetary Logos and solar Logos, they dwell within, yet are found without the planetary scheme or solar scheme. And then one more quote. Only as a man understands himself can he arrive at an understanding of that which is the sum total that we call God, which is what you referred to at the beginning, Joey.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that evoke, these few paragraphs?
Well, it does return to that, something we say often is to know thyself. So it's a look internally rather than externally. And that is different than, the sort of Abrahamic approach, that from that we're looking externally, it is outside of ourselves, and it's a dualistic kind of idea. But this tends to paint a non-dualistic picture. And I love that phrase, what the scientist calls energy, the religious man calls God, but it's,
Right.
the two are one. It's that's a beautiful way of looking at it. And I also like the idea that baked into, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like throughout the whole Alice Bailey sort of mystery tradition, baked in is the idea that this is it's not static, it's an evolving thing. It's a growing thing,
The thing is that creation is still happening.
Mm-hmm.
We're part of it. Past, present, and future coexist.
Yeah.
And we happen to be in the present with a future we look forward to and a past we look back on.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're present to is life. And life is all-encompassing. And God is all-encompassing. So what we're dealing with here, I think the reference you made to man know thyself, which was what we're told was inscribed above the portal when you entered the Pythagorean mystery school at Crotona. Because it's said in particularly in the old laws of magic, law, I mean L-O-R-E, not L-A-W-S, the law of magic, is that the trinity of man is the key which unlocks the mystery and the gates of nature.
Mm.
So somehow we are the microcosm. We go back to what it says in the Bible, that we're made, in the likeness and image, or the image and likeness of the Creator. Therefore, we are a reproduction.
Mm.
I don't mean that God's got two arms, two legs, and a beating heart in the way that we do, but somehow, in essence, we mirror that. That's what the Bible indicates there.
Yeah, I think that's what was meant by the evolution, because before we had the tools and the language to understand that, naturally, of course, when we think of that concept, we think, oh, the God that we're talking about looks like me. Well, but we might actually just be talking about the way in this plane that atoms and chemicals mix together.
Exactly.
And from that creates whatever the local ecosystem requires.
Well, because we can have an anthropomorphic approach, and
Right.
everything looks like us. And it's like God is a big stick figure in the sky.
Right. Where more could be just, like in this instance, carbon appears, or in this instance, silicon or water, it just, that in those chemical bonds and in the way that the atoms interact is the beauty of God.
Right. And so we're going to continue
Mm-hmm.
to read, but it evokes all these images of life that you know, I sort of, I'm speechless. It goes back to, I wake up in the morning, I look out here at the hills surrounding the Ojai Valley, and I go, incredible beauty. I mean, who could dream this up?
Mm-hmm.
Who dreamt up this planet?
Yeah.
Or was it just a condensation of matter randomly coming together? No, matter doesn't randomly come together. It has to be held by something. And what we're understanding that it's held by a consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
But this consciousness is the whole thing, the
Yeah.
whole enchilada. And inside of that, we've got our own microcosms.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really how I'm approaching it now. And we go back to one of the principles here at Meditation Mount that we work with, the principle of essential divinity, that says inside every aspect of creation, inside you and me and everyone listening to this podcast, is a spark of the Creator, is a fire that was part of the original fire, because the Bible says our God is an all-consuming fire. We also contain the note of creation, the signature tune of who we are as a fractal of this one sound is our note. And we're part of the ongoing reverberation of in the beginning was the Word. And that's the mystery. So the mind can't say, oh, yes, now I get it. The only way to get it is to participate in it and allow it to reverberate through our being, through experience. Experience is the reverberation of life inside us. That's how we register it. It's not just with the mind. I think recently in the last number of 100 years or 400 or 500 years, particularly in the West, we've gone about it in a reductionist way. The mind has been very helpful, but it's limited our ability to embrace the mystery. So, do you want to see what else he has to say?
Let's move on through.
Well, okay, so now we're moving from extracts from Glamour, A World Problem, written by Alice Bailey. God transcendent eternally exists, but can only be seen and known and correctly approached by God immanent, I-M-M-A-N-E-N-T, immanent, not imminent, as meaning about to happen, although I do believe that the immanent is immanent. Immanent in individual persons, in groups, in nations, in organized forms, and in religion, in humanity as a whole, and in the planetary life itself. It's going back to that, what I just said, that inside of every atom of creation, whether that be a subatomic particle or that atom be a planet or a person, life exists, God exists. And we've often gone back to this reference from the Bhagavad Gita, and I think we're going to come up against it again throughout this particular episode. Having pervaded the universe with a fragment of myself, yet I remain. So the yet I remain is the God within us, the God immanent. And having pervaded the universe with a fragment of myself, I remain. I remain as the overall transcendent, and yet I live in everything. And then it really, for me, evolution and the whole unfolding of the mystery is the continuous dialogue, dynamic dialogue between God transcendent and God immanent. And that we somehow are the place where that conversation can be had. Not just in words, but it's an intermingling of these two aspects of the one, the transcendent and the immanent. And you can't figure it out with the mind, but you can create a space in which it can be experienced, which is what incarnation is all about. Incarnation is the space in which we can discover, as St. Augustine said, time is simply that in which to find God. So space and time are the conditions in which we can discover firsthand, in our blood and bones, what God may mean not as a description, but as a lived experience. So, carrying on.
Mm-hmm.
In attempting to describe pure being, quote unquote, or God, and in the effort to arrive at some understanding of the nature of divinity, the formula of negation has been evolved. God is not this. God is not that. God is no thing or nothing. God is neither time nor space. God is not feeling or thought. God is not form or substance. God simply is.
Mm-hmm.
Capital I, capital S. God simply is.
Yeah, the approach to negation is one that we definitely see come up, and we talked a little bit about that in the last couple episodes. Approaching things through negation. Like the wireless or the horseless carriage, which
Yes.
were the examples that we used. But even if you're trying to describe something that's nothing by using something, it's you're chasing your tail again.
But you can only describe something for what it is once you've
Mhm.
experienced it.
That's right.
We use that example of I grew up with the wireless, which later became the radio,
Mm-hmm.
because it was something that didn't have wires. Then they realized it was transmitting these radio waves, so it was called the radio.
Yeah.
And then the car originally was called the horseless carriage because you got a carriage
Mm-hmm.
without a horse. And then you realize, no, it was a carriage, and it was a car, shortened to car. It was a car. So now we call them cars. So you name it once you've experienced what it is
Mm-hmm.
rather than what it isn't.
Yeah.
Oh, it's classic.
It is classic.
So this next paragraph, I think, starts off with a wonderful, wonderful statement. It says, the problem of God.
Mm-hmm.
The fact of God will be established, and men's questioning in this respect will end. Such a God will not be a figment of man's creative imagination or an extension of his own consciousness, but a deity of essential life, who is the sum total of all energies. A God most surely transcendent, but at the same time most assuredly immanent. A God of such immensity that the heavens proclaim him, and so intimate that the humblest child can recognize him. With the eye of the inner vision can God be seen, even when man is occupying a body of flesh. Not with the physical eye can deity be seen, though the hallmark of divinity is everywhere. There is an eye which can be developed and used, and which will enable its possessor to see God working on the inner side of life within himself and within all forms. For when thine eye is single, thy whole body is full of light, and in that light shall we see light and so see God. This is taken from esoteric astrology, and that last quote, when thine eye is single, which is the biblical quote, refers to the opening of the third eye.
Mm-hmm.
The eye that sees. And we're recording this in the sign of Taurus.
Mm-hmm.
And the motto of Taurus is, when the eye is opened,
Mm-hmm.
all will be illuminated.
Yeah, it's app time.
When the eye is opened, we will see,
Mm-hmm.
and all is illuminated. So we have to reach a point where there's an opening.
Yeah.
It's like when I look at the flowers, there's some roses have just opened in the garden here, some glorious yellow roses, and also some white roses surrounding the Kuan Yin statue. Now, a few weeks ago, they were buds.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I looked at the bud, I couldn't see a rose, but the rose was inside of it.
Yeah.
Now I can see the rose.
Yeah.
The rose was always there.
Mm.
God's always here and now.
Right.
Go back to our dear friend Ram Dass.
Mm-hmm.
Be here now. There is no other place to experience.
That's right.
Yeah, you try not being here and now. Well, actually,
Yeah.
I've lived quite a bit of my life, not in the here and now, but in the there and there and the maybe someday kind of reality.
Mm-hmm. There's quite a bit of that, isn't there? Yeah.
Yeah. So why don't we just take one more here, and then just take a breather. To portray adequately the wonder and the destiny of the human kingdom lies beyond my powers or the power of any human pen, no matter how great a man's realization may be or his response to the beauty of God's world. Divinity must be lived, expressed, and manifested to be understood. God must be loved, known, and revealed within the human heart and brain in order to be intellectually grasped. It's as though we've got to go through the whole creation process ourselves. We've got to give birth to a realization of that which gave birth to us.
Yeah, there's so much wrapped up in the concept of creation and the experience of creation, that whole process. So it seems like it's very experiential.
Well,
and I mean, we're co-creating, which makes sense. Yeah.
if you look at creation as the externalization of God, my question then is, well, what's the internal state that had this desire to reveal itself in this way?
Yeah, that's a good question.
You could do reverse engineering.
Yeah.
It's like, if this is what it looks like on the outside, let's reverse engineer and say, so what does God look like on the inside? And we know it's not a thing. The closest we've come to in the recent episodes is we go back to God is love. Love is not a thing. Love is a presence. Love is a substance. Love is. And the whole, the scriptures and the ancient texts hint at the reason that the worlds came into being is because love needed to express itself. And we talked about, we're recording this in the sun sign of Taurus. And one of the planets that rules Taurus is Venus. And Venus, most people think of as love and sentimentality because, we talked about that. That's the association. But occultly, Venus has to do with a light of mind. And the whole understanding of love is a very different experience through the lens of Venus. It's said that love, in Venusian terms, is called pure reason. And when you hear those words, you think immediately that it's logic. But we're talking about reason as in the French, the raison d'être, the reason for existence. So the light of the mind understands love as the reason why everything exists, why God is. It still doesn't tell us what God is or what love is, but it gives us a sense of behind this creation is a deep urge to express something. The only way we can grasp that is to recreate that in our own lives. Find that urge to love, that urge to be, the will to love, the will to act. And we, in a microcosmic way, become expressions of that in daily life. That's the closest we can come to walking the path. And what the mystics in the Middle Ages did, which is practice the presence, or the imitation of Christ, or you went about your business as if God were expressing through you, which, in fact, is a truth. But it's not a truth that lives in the mind. It's a truth that lives in the whole of your being once you walk that path. So I guess the invitation today is, let's not use too many words to try and figure out what God is. The invitation is to be that God.
Yeah. And experience that love, the love for creation.
And beauty. The Agni Yoga teachings always refers to the salvation of the world is through beauty. Because when you see beauty, what you see is the wonder and perfection of creation, because it's sacred geometry. The forms that are created on the outside are the sacred geometry of the inner. So that's why beauty is always seen to be a gateway to God, particularly in the Agni Yoga teaching.
Yeah.
Well, I need to take a breath now and figure out. So,
Well, when we're tackling such a light subject, you know, so one of the things that struck me is, and we'll get to it more, is this concept of the evolving nature of God as consciousness. I think that's for me, that's where the most questions. That's where I leave my heart and go back into my head. And I think it's an interesting perspective that comes from the Alice Bailey teachings. That because it doesn't seem like that's something that is present in many other schools of thought or any other religions or any other philosophies. That it's
right, because it sort of intimates that in a lot of the teachings that there is something, and creation is how that something is expressing itself. But if the something itself, this is ever evolving, then what gave birth to the desire to have an ever evolving and expanding universe of possibility?
Yeah, and it does raise questions of like if this is of evolution, then why would God need to evolve?
In order for love to be expressed, in order to be touched by love and to touch love, if that's my sort of immediate response. But it's an open question. It's a great question, Joey.
Yeah, because it does have a little bit of the Sorcerer's Apprentice vibe to me.
Yeah,
it's like that's why I initially said the idea, the concept of the demiurge. Sometimes it seems like the god of this realm was punching above his weight sometimes.
Well, funnily enough, you should say that. Not not that we're going to sort of tell tales out of school here, but our planetary logos in the old teachings is referred to sometimes as an imperfect God.
Mm-hmm.
That one means that one has not yet perfected the ability to create a distortion-free world.
Mm-hmm.
But it will be evolved to a point where the inside and the outside will correspond, just like you and I.
Mm-hmm.
Struggling with the same thing.
Yeah.
We're imperfect, not in essence, but in our capacity to express the perfection on the inside, which is the promise.
Mm-hmm.
We're not yet equipped to reveal it on the outside in its full beauty. And beauty is conformity with that inner truth.
Right. Yeah. It's an adherence to those sometimes mathematical principles, the spiral of the, of the shell or the,
Absolutely. Well, the whole of evolution is a spiral journey.
Mm-hmm.
You've got spiral galaxies, you've got spirulina, you've got everything.
Yeah.
So, and the only way to break out of Groundhog Day is to aspire to something higher and push the circle upwards, and it becomes a spiral.
Mm-hmm.
So otherwise you get stuck in this ceaseless round of being, as the Buddhists would say, the ceaseless round of rebirth.
Mm-hmm.
Until you realize that, hey, I got to let go. Detachment from what I think God is, what I think I am, and go basically free floating in God.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept because that's it's like leaving the text behind and going into the woods without a map or a compass.
But the classic thing is, I am not lost. I am here.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't a clue where here is compared to other places on the map. But I am not lost. I am here.
Yeah, a friend of mine used to always say, someone would, kids would be playing, someone would tell him to get lost, and he'd say, I can't. I always know where I am. But in this concept, it's like, I always know that I am.
I always know that I am.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of, we're talking about the I am.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the I am that, which is the projection of the I am on the outside.
Right.
And then when the outside has the ability to reflect on its own inner and makes the deep connection, suddenly the I am that becomes the I am that I am.
Mm.
And I'd like to pull in the middle of the Alice Bailey writings, a quote from the Agni Yoga teachings, because it also talks about God. It starts off, this is from Leaves of Moria's Garden, Book 1. It says, safeguard your solitude. God, or Aum, A-U-M, is the highest being of your inner self. My breath is the daring towards beauty. The great gift manifested through your sacrifice will lead you to joyous realization in your pursuit of truth. Eschew the life of the slumberer. That means reject the life of the sleeper. Love the life that sparkles in thoughts enveloped in the divine radiance. Strengthen the growing power of your spirit. Basically, it's encouraging to say, get in there, participate.
I love that about Agni Yoga. It's very much about getting the game. Put me in the game, coach. You know,
Well,
it's like,
I like, that's not referred to the God, but
yeah.
We know that Master M, who's behind the teachings of Agni Yoga, says, look, don't give me your promises, don't give me your excuses, show me action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's because it's a fiery philosophy. It's a
And you mentioned this early on in this episode. You said that, there are many interpretations of God, and sometimes those different interpretations go to war with each other.
Yeah, they do.
And you have religious warfare. One of the quotes from Leaves of Moria's Garden, which I particularly like, is he says, solemnly do I say that therein is salvation. Long live thy God. So will you say to everyone, and exchanging gods, you will walk to the one. I'll read that again.
Oh, that's powerful. I love that.
This is a way how to get
Yeah.
out of a religious impasse. If you're in, locked heads with somebody about, your God or my God, what he says, look, solemnly do I say that therein is salvation. Long live thy God. So you will say to everyone, and exchanging gods, you will walk to the one.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the most powerful lines of how to break this religious warfare and if you like, the duality.
Yeah.
My God's better than your God. Yeah. Or my dad can beat your dad up or whatever, whatever we say to prove that whatever I hold on to is better than yours.
Yeah.
So my God's better than your God. Let them duke it out. But he's saying, no, my greeting to you is long live thy God.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's
revolutionary. That changes everything. If you could actually practice that, if we could practice that, wow.
Because you're acknowledging there is one, and everything is an expression of that. I go back to the quote that we've used many times: is that the Theosophical Society has a motto. The Theosophical Society has a motto, and that motto is, there is no religion higher than truth or God or truth. Yeah. And I guess this is what we've done with God is we put a label on it. It's this because it corresponds to what we'd like to believe it to be, because it gives us security.
Or it probably promotes our agenda, whatever that might be.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And in the name of God, or God said this. Well, God basically said one thing, the word that gave birth to everything. And then the Master Jesus, who was an embodiment of that, along with the Buddha and everyone else, and Mother Teresa, everyone you can name who's lived a holy life, basically said, love thy neighbor.
Right there, because there's a lot of wisdom in that. People think it says, I'm just supposed to be nice to people, or but when you realize you are your neighbor.
Well, love thy neighbor as thyself.
Yeah.
Which goes back to, we've said before, that the question in the Bible, am I my brother's keeper? Actually, how about rephrasing this? Am I my brother's keeper or sister's keeper? It's not a yes or no answer, Joey. The answer is, I am my brother. I am my sister. It goes back to thy God. And exchanging gods, you will walk to the one.
So it does raise for me a question that, so we're learning to love each other, and learning to love does that mean that God is learning to love and God didn't know how to love? That's.
Or maybe, just like the rose that bloomed a few days ago in the garden, That rose was always present. Love was always present, but it had not yet been revealed.
Mm-hmm.
We are the instruments of revelation of the love of God.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at it that way, it's like, whoa, what an assignment.
Yeah.
You mean I'm not just here to struggle and survive and fight with everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that turns
Yeah.
everything around.
It sure does. And we certainly spend a lot of time doing that.
Yeah.
A lot of time and energy.
And here's just one more quote from Agni Yoga, taken from the book Heart,
Mm-hmm.
written in 1932. Even in the most ancient times, people understood the significance of the heart. They regarded the heart as the abode of God. They pledged their oaths by placing their hands upon the heart. So the closest you can say, I swear by Almighty God to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, rather than put your hands on Bibles or whatever texts, you would put your hand on your heart, because it's the closest you come to this is where God lives. But then the question is, well, what is God? Which brings us back to our podcast. So, do you want to give some further thoughts before we digest some more of the words that the Master DK has given us?
Yeah, let's wade back into these waters.
The next section is a fairly lengthy section, and it's taken from Esoteric Psychology 2. And we'll break it up. We'll take some digestive spaces. We have spoken here of God in terms of person, and we have used, therefore, the pronouns he and his. Must it therefore be inferred that we are dealing with a stupendous personality, which we call God? And do we therefore belong to that school of thought which we call the anthropomorphic? The Buddhist teaching recognizes no God or person. Is it therefore wrong from our point of view and approach, or is it right? Only an understanding of man as a divine expression in time and space can reveal this mystery. So he's pointing back to sort of man, know thyself. Mm. Or as we said, the modern equivalent of that inscription over the mystery school portal is be yourself. Mm. So when we be ourselves, we're being God to the best of our ability. Mm-hmm. So the question is, who's right, who's wrong? Mm-hmm. The Buddhists that say there's no God, or the other traditions and religions that say there is a God and it's a person. This is what DK says. Both schools of thought are right and in no way contradict each other. In their synthesis and in their blending, the truth as it really is can begin, dimly, to appear. There is a God transcendent who, quote unquote, having pervaded the whole universe with a fragment of himself, can still say, I remain. There is a God immanent whose life is the source of the activity, intelligence, growth, and attractiveness of every form in all the realms of nature. There is likewise in every human being a transcendent soul which, when the life cycle on earth has come and gone, and when the period of manifestation is over, becomes again the unmanifest and the formless, of which can also say, I remain. In form and when in manifestation, the only way in which the human mind and brain can express its recognition of the conditioning divine life is to speak in terms of person, of individuality. Hence we speak of God as a person, or his will, his nature, and his form. Behind the manifested universe, however, stands the formless one. That, in italics, that which is not an individual, being free from the limitations of an individualized existence. Therefore, the Buddhist is right when he emphasizes the non-individualized nature of deity and refuses to personalize divinity. The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit of the Christian theology, embodying as they do the triplicities of all the theologies, disappear also into the one when the period of manifestation is over. They remain as one, with quality and life untouched and undifferentiated as they are when in manifestation. Now, that's a huge chunk. He's basically saying, look, they're both right.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they're both limited in their
Mm-hmm.
perspective.
Yeah, they both have a context, but all those contexts exist within a single.
Because it's a perspective. It's
Right.
not the actual lived experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A perspective is a viewing point.
Yeah.
And we've said before that when the viewing point becomes a point of view, it becomes a fixed belief.
Yeah.
If my point of view about God is this, I believe God is this and nothing else.
Mm.
If there are different viewing points of what God is, then I can accept there's a multiplicity. There's more of a holistic viewpoint of God. Now, God is not the perspective. God is the experience, as DK's hinting at.
Yeah.
Wow, what else does this do to our daily life? I mean, it's one thing to sit and read these books and we're sort of disconnected possibly for a moment from our daily reality, but carrying this awareness into our daily life, what difference does it make to you, Joey? What difference does it make to any of us?
It's well, for me personally, it asks of me to try to live within myself in a way that honors both myself and as the one of the entire. So in that sense, it's like if I'm taking care of myself and growing and learning, I'm living inward the same way I'm living outward. And so it's sort of a call to use a phrase as to up level your existence by acknowledging that we are part of one. So therefore, and anything that's happening is happening to all of us together. And so it's really about trying to, and how do you live that when someone's cutting you off in traffic? How do you live that when you are, filing your taxes or trying to, all these little things that compromise, daily life, and looking at them as these little moments of reminder. They're not, it's it's not chaos. It's an opportunity to experience yourself and yourself in that moment.
Yes. I mean, that's really what it's about. I mentioned in a previous podcast that on my altar this past year, I've got this phrase that I wrote, and it's there facing me in the morning. I live in integrity with myself.
Mm.
I just was reminded of that by what you just said.
Yeah.
I live in integrity, which means my outer reflects my inner.
Mm.
Now, the inner isn't a definition. The inner is a state of being.
Mm.
It's a set of qualities. It's a synthesis of many things. And then I go back to a way that the God within is now being talked about in the spiritual groups that I'm familiar with. It's called sovereignty.
Mm.
Your sovereign self, your God self. Rather than call it the God self, it's called the sovereign self, because it's that aspect of creation that you're given responsibility of, stewardship of, to be the sovereign of, which means to be the steward of.
Yeah.
The old fairy tales, it was always, in order to become a king, the prince was given a part of the land to govern before they could govern the whole land.
Yeah.
A prince was a king in training.
Right.
A sovereign self is God in training.
Yeah.
Or God in evolution, as you would say, an evolving God. So for me, the sovereign self goes back to what we refer to as essential divinity here at Meditation Mount. That aspect of the one that lives in everything. And when I see it in you and everyone else, I honor it, I salute it, I celebrate it, because it lives in me. And therefore, what are we celebrating together when we meet each other? That we are both, we are all carriers of life. We are all expressions of the one life. I mean, it's like coming home, a family reunion, free of trauma. It's a joyful reunion.
Yeah, the impossible dream.
The impossible dream. Well, it'll take time.
Yeah. And that's what we're here to work out. We're here to find those new pathways. For me, that's what that kind of means is we're here just trying over it again, and to find that sort of synthesis.
Yeah. Shall we continue to read what the Master DK has to say? Just picking up from where we just left off. The interplay of soul and mind produces the manifested universe with all that is therein. When that interplay is persisting either in God or in man, we use, for how else can we speak with clarity, terms of human origin and therefore limiting. Such is our present stage of enlightenment. Or should we say, unenlightenment? Thus the idea of individuality, of personality, and of form is built up. When the interplay ceases and manifestation ends, such terms are no longer suitable. They have no meaning. Yet the underlying one, whether God or man, persists. Thus, in human thought, preserved by us by the great teacher of the East, the Buddha, we have the concept of the transcendent deity divorced from the triplicities, the dualities, and the multiplicity of manifestation. There is but life, formless, freed from the individuality, unknown. In the teaching of the West, preserved for us and formulated for us by the Christ, the concept of God immanent is preserved, God in us and in all forms. In the synthesis of the Eastern and Western teachings, and in the merging of these two great schools of thought, something of the superlative whole can be sensed merely, not known. I mean, he's basically just saying, look, you've just got part of the puzzle, and we're piecing it together. East and West are two of the big pieces we got to put together.
I like that idea that you can sense it, not know it. And that's more of the heart than the mind.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The heart senses, the heart registers vibration because it is itself pulsing all the time. It is an organ of resonance. It receives, it resonates, it radiates.
I think that the concept of love, like you don't have to be able to describe love to love and to be loved and to experience love. You don't have to be able to articulate it.
Well, it's like on a dating app. Well, please answer these questions. How would you describe love? No, you explore it through mutual attraction on all levels and all frequencies.
Yeah.
So, oh dear, we've got a couple more paragraphs here to complete this particular set. Then we're done with God.
We're off
done
this
with
subject.
God. Check that box, Joey.
Yeah, that's it. Because you asked earlier, what do you do with this? And that's interesting because, we do an episode on this, but it pervades it filters down into everything. And so it really is the only conversation.
So this is the one episode that suffuses all other episodes.
That's right. It is the container.
So this just reaffirms and revisits what's just been said. And this one is from The Reappearance of the Christ. The Eastern faiths have ever emphasized God immanent, deep within the human heart, nearer than hands and feet. There's a phrase in the Trans-Himalayan Western traditions that says, nearer than hands and feet, closer than breathing. That's where God is. That's where God lives. Mm-hmm. So it's just like it's that close. So nearer than hands and feet, the self, the one, the Atma, smaller than the small, yet all-comprehensive. The Western faiths have presented God transcendent, transcendent, outside his universe, an onlooker. God transcendent, first of all, conditioned men's concept of deity, for the action of this transcendent God appeared in the process of nature. Later, in the Jewish dispensation, God appeared as the tribal Jehovah, as the soul, and then in parentheses, the rather unpleasant soul, of a nation. Next, God was seen as a perfected man, and the divine God-man walked the earth in the person of the Christ. Today, we have a rapidly growing emphasis upon God immanent and in every human being and in every created form. Today, we should have the churches presenting a synthesis of these two ideas, which have been summed up for us in the statement of Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, and he will return to the same statement. Having pervaded this whole universe with a fragment of myself, I remain. God greater than the created whole, yet God present also in the part. God transcendent guarantees the plan of our world and is the purpose conditioning all lives from the minutest atom up through all the kingdoms of nature to man. So we've got God as everything and God as Anu, the speck of dust, the speck of God. And so there was one more paragraph from the externalization of the hierarchy, just to wrap up our reading from Ponder on This today. Slowly, there is dawning upon the awakening consciousness of humanity the great paralleling truth of God immanent, divinely pervading all forms, conditioning from within all realms in nature, expressing innate divinity through human beings. There is a growing and developing belief that Christ is in us, as he was in the Master Jesus. And this belief will alter world affairs and humanity's entire attitude to life. I mean, this is the key to what's happening now. And this is interesting that the Tibetan says there is a growing and developing belief that Christ is in us as he was in the Master Jesus. And this somehow puts forward the notion that the Christ is this eternal presence, this eternal promise of who we are, the God within, and that the Master Jesus was an amazing incarnation and expression of that. Not the only begotten Son of God according to the ageless wisdom, but a begotten Son of God. Probably the first one to come along that really represented the whole package.
Right. Yeah. And that is quite a differentiate, you know.
Yeah. So I guess what we're talking about, we're in the age of revelation. We've talked about this.
Yeah.
What is revelation? It's God immanent coming out of the closet.
Yeah. Yeah. And experiencing what that is, how that feels, and what it means to exist in that space. You know, and that's something that we're doing. We're learning to coexist in that. And I think that's there's some training wheels and there are some bumps and bruises along the way. But.
So, and I guess we have to declare, Joe, we do have a sponsor for this. You know, every podcast has a sponsor. God's our sponsor.
Right.
But we don't know who that is. All we know is that they're blessing us. But who is God?
Yeah.
I mean, we go back to, we start with who or what or why is God?
Yeah.
And we know that can't be answered by the mind, for the mind. We can only be invited to experience God as a mystery to be lived in the here and the now, together. What do you have by way of
well, just going on what you were just saying, I mean, that is almost exactly how I connect with the concept of God, because, you know, my brain wants to do analytical high jumps and circles and, you know, but if I sit quietly with my eyes closed and I just open my heart in the same way that you don't have to be a poet to express, you know, the love when the first time you hold your child, or when you have a puppy, or when you see, you know, the sun come up after a particularly difficult time in your life, like physically and metaphorically, when that sun comes up, you don't have to have the words for it to understand it and feel it.
Because that love already lived inside of you and it was called forth by that experience.
Right.
God already lives inside of us and is called forth by an experience, of a corresponding outer experience.
And that's, for me, that's how this manifests in, I was raised Catholic. I converted to Judaism when I got married. And then I've been studying Buddhism. And then, so I've never met a religion I didn't like, but I also don't need another ism in my life. But I think all of that just becomes set dressing for the thing that lives in your heart.
Well, we're the eternal pilgrim.
Mm-hmm.
We are life on a journey to not only discover itself, but to express itself fully. And we've said this, when the one needed to be itself, it created the many.
Mm-hmm.
And the many woke up as individual units separated from each other, not knowing that they belong to each other. And then slowly, as we move forward, we realize that I am not a separated self. I am an aspect of the one life seeking to reunite with itself. And when the many come back to the one has a deeper experience of knowing of itself than that consciousness and awareness that sent out the many on its journey of discovery. We are how God experiences itself, whatever the it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I go back to that phrase, life is a mystery to be lived. God is the mystery to be experienced, one day at a time, one heart opening at a time.
Wow, that was a beautiful take. It's a difficult subject, but it's also one that I think we're approaching a place where maybe we can become one, and embrace that love and merge all those gods into one.
Yes, may thy God be with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as we walk together, these many gods become the one. Synthetic version of whatever.
Like we're just walking each other home, walking all these gods home.
Thank you, Ram Dass.
Thank you, Ram Dass. Yeah.
And thank you, Joey.
Thank you, Michael.
Bye.
All right.